This is our second week of exploring the United Methodist Church following the historic General Conference in May of 2024. A turning point in history for this is for the first time we really dealt with what's our identity. And last week I shared that beginning this week we're going to explore practices of faith. Each of these United Methodist practices of faith will end with the suffix ing, because when you add that suffix in English grammar, it turns a noun into a verb. A noun becomes an activity, a practice. We're a behaving people. That's our identity. These practices are in the faith tradition that what marks a follower of Jesus as a United Methodist is our behavior, our actions of agape love. Following General Conference of 2024, Blake Lassiter, a person that I do not know, wrote these words: "Oh yes, we will be called a dead sect, heretical. Some people will be harsh, others will be dismissive. All new beginnings are filled with critics, longing for the good old days back in Egypt. There will always be condemners and the critics. They long not for the new promise, but for the days that never should have existed. Just bless their hearts as they seek their Egypts. We're still traveling on to the kingdom." End of quote. Note the emphasis on the future. Traveling on to the kingdom. A friend of mine in Oklahoma traveled back to her hometown in Kansas, and she thought I'd be interested in the story. It was a weekend of cherished memories attending a high school reunion. After the party was over, on Sunday morning, she decided to drive out and attend worship at the church where she attended as a youth. She told me how meaningful it was as she sat next to a woman who was her church school teacher as a youth. Following the service, she turned to that teacher and said, "This is so wonderful. It's just the way it used to be." And her friend said, "Honey, it is just the way it used to be, but it's not wonderful. We voted to close last week." "Why?" my friend asked. The response was obvious and profound. Quote, "We have found out that what used to be is no longer what we need to be today." Note the lack of emphasis on the future. No futuring. No attitude of traveling on to the kingdom. No collective thought about what the new day demands in terms of a new way. Now, what is this practice that I'm going to deal with today called futuring? That's what Lassiter describes, and the church in rural Kansas did not experience. The 2024 General Conference practiced futuring when they decided that many nations of the world is where homophobia in the form of language that homosexuality is compatible with Christian teaching. That's one of the ways we got it wrong. Prevents the witness of the church, which calls for followers of Jesus to be persons of grace, empathetic, love, with no exceptions. The 2024 General Conference decided that we needed to discontinue that harm. The 2024 General Conference practiced futuring when they revised the social principles to be certain that understandings of faith need to be considered by United Methodists before we address social, political, economic, scientific, and personal issues arising today and in the future. It's a new day. We needed a new way. And the revised social principles gave us that new way. You see, that's what futuring is all about. That happened in the 2024 General Conference. The ridding ourselves of the phrase homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching as no longer a part of the future of the United Methodist Church, and to revise the social principles to be sure we believe that faith is engaging all of our life together. You see, futuring is the practice of making decisions today which will enable the United Methodist Church to be faithful in the future rather than returning to strategies of mission and ministry which worked in the past. Futuring is refusing to be loyal to the 7 last words of the church. It's always been done this way before. You see, futuring is a practice that I've observed as being a crucial component in the life of local churches. We came up as a bishop working with others. We came up with a question that we asked every local church staff parish committee, and that is, where do you want to be in 5 to 7 years? Some churches welcomed the question and shared their dreams and hopes without hesitation. Other churches responded to the same question with a description of the good old days to which they wanted to return. That clarifies the difference. Futuring is a hope and dream into the future. The lack of futuring is cherishing and wanting to return to the good old days. You see, in our history, futuring was when the church took that bold stand and witnessed against the practice of slavery, when antagonists quoted the Bible in support of this inhumane practice. Futuring was when Wesley took to the parks to preach when the pews were empty, even though his antagonists quoted creeds and doctrines to resist his desire to preach to the people rather than the empty pews. Futuring was when Jesus broke bread with sinners, prostitutes, tax collectors, in the face of the religious leaders of the day, using every degree of authority they had to deny the truth that he proclaimed. Yes, the 2024 General Conference, they knew the most meaningful times of faithfulness in the Methodist tradition was when the church practiced futuring rather than the good old days. You see, the United Methodist Church has clearly affirmed that beyond 2024, one of our practices is going to be futuring. Faithfully following Jesus' teaching on the reign of agape love. It reflects the best history of the faithfulness of the church. It represents the dreams of both the young and old. It's what the hymn writer had in mind when he coined the phrase about God's church, forward through the ages. Futuring is forming the future rather than creating the past. Listen to these words of the hymn writer. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine. Gifts in differing measure, hearts of one accord, manifold the service, one the sure reward. Wider grows the kingdom, reign of love and light. For it we must labor till our faith is sight. Prophets have proclaimed it, martyrs testified, poets sung its glory, heroes for it died. Forward through the ages in unbroken line, move the faithful spirits at the call divine. You see, it's clear to me that if a person is uncomfortable with the practice of futuring, they will be uneasy as participants in the United Methodist Church. For the identity of the United Methodist Church is clear. We are committed to the practice of futuring. For your thought and conversation, what are your stories of a faithful futuring by a community of faith? Secondly, what are your stories of faith communities recreating the past? And finally, who are the individuals who are practicing futuring in their leadership in the life of the church today? Thank you for being a part of our journey.